Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon.
I have a dream today.
Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
London police have arrested WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. Here you can see him being dragged out of the Ecuadorian embassy by British police. You can hear him shouting a little bit that we don't know exactly what he's saying. We are told that Assange is now in a central London police station and he could appear in court in the next hour or two, which of course we will bring to you live.
This is such a fascinating picture, an amazing picture to see. And so much history here. Julian Assange, obviously a central figure in so much of the drama in the United States over the last 8 or 9 years. Of course, WikiLeaks, a central player in the release of the hacked emails from the Democratic National Committee and Hillary Clinton's campaign, part of the Russian attack on the U.S. election. WikiLeaks also posted classified military information on the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Assange spent 7 years in the Ecuadorian embassy avoiding extradition over a sexual assault case, but that case has been dropped.
Not really. That case hasn't been dropped. It's not closed. The charges weren't. They were revoked by Sweden. Anyway, that's what we sort of woke up to today was Julian Assange being dragged out of the Ecuadorian embassy in London and charged with one single count. One single charge. So far, I will say so far, but a single charge, conspiracy to commit computer intrusion. He was not, this is starting a whole conversation in this country about freedom of the press and my freedom of speech and your freedom of speech. This is not what he's been charged with. He hasn't been charged with publishing anything wrongfully, let alone illegally. He's been charged with helping to crack a code of a computer that Chelsea Manning was trying to break into. Apparently, they were on this internet, it's sort of a messaging thing, like real. Some of you use, you remember AOL? Remember that? AOL, what was that? What was that? Instant messaging. So some people, still use that. I don't know who. But it's like that. It's called Jabber, okay? And they were on this, instant messaging thing, and they were exchanging messages, and Chelsea was having a hard time cracking a code into a State Department computer. Now, Chelsea Manning worked for the Army intelligence, and she had told Julian Assange that she had pretty much exhausted all the material that she could get her hands on, and Julian Assange was writing her back saying, curious eyes never dry up. So he was encouraging her to keep on, hacking and to keep on providing. That's fine. As far as a journalist goes, if somebody was, providing me with hacked material, and they said, okay, well, this is all the material I can get to you. And I said, okay, well, listen, I would really like to see more. That was really good stuff. But if you could get me more, there's nothing illegal about that. And that is not what Assange is being charged with. Assange is being charged with this. And this is directly from the indictment. Here is the indictment. It is not long. It comes from, it's a grand jury indictment. Apparently, this happened a year ago. Remember when Mueller, it wasn't Mueller's office, it was some other case, some hate crimes case, I think. Right, Candace? Yeah. It was some other hate crimes case, and by accident, they had copied and pasted a portion of this indictment that was under seal, and people started to understand that Julian Assange was going to be indicted, that there was a sealed indictment. Well, that is this. That actually is this indictment here. So this is what it says in the indictment. I can read you the whole thing because it's really not that long, but I'll just get to paragraph 7 first, and then we can backtrack, okay? On or about March 8th, 2010. Now remember, 2010, because this is going to come up. Assange agreed to assist Manning in cracking a password stored on United States Department of Defense computers connected to the Secret Internet Protocol Network, a United States government network used for classified documents and communications as designated according to executive order, blah, 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 or its predecessor orders. Manning, who had access to the computers in connection with her duties as an intelligence analyst, was also using the computers to download classified records to transmit to WikiLeaks. Army regulations prohibited Manning from attempting to bypass or circumvent security mechanisms on government-provided information systems and from sharing personal accounts and authenticators such as passwords. The portion of the password Manning gave to Assange to crack was stored as a, quote, hash value in a computer file that was accessible only by users with administrative level privileges. Manning did not have administrative level privileges and used special software, namely a Linux operating system, to access the computer file and obtain the portion of the password provided to Assange. Now, stop right there, whether you understand Linux or you understand Jabber or you understand what was going on here. The charge against Assange is not publishing. The charge against Assange is not a freedom of speech, a journalistic inquiry into whether or not journalists can publish. It is not that. It is aiding in the cracking of a password. It is an unauthorized intrusion into a classified portion of an administrative only, eyes only, a secret. This is about hacking. This indictment is not about journalism. I know of no journalists who have ever participated in hacking of classified information. I know of many journalists who receive classified information and publish it. I've been friends with Daniel Ellsberg for years. All of these anti-war protests that I've been to, I've met Daniel Ellsberg at many of them, many, many times. And, he is the source of the Pentagon Papers, okay? Now, nobody was ever prosecuted for publishing classified material in the history of this country, and neither is Julian Assange being prosecuted for publishing anything at any time. This indictment is to do with cracking into a computer intrusion, aka hacking. That's what it says in this indictment, okay? The portion of the password Manning gave to Assange to crack was stored as a hash value in a computer file that was accessible only by users with administrative level privileges. Manning did not have administrative level privileges and used special software, namely a Linux operating system, to access the computer file and obtain the portion of the password provided to Assange. Then it goes on. Cracking the password would have allowed Manning to log onto the computers under a username that did not belong to her. Such a measure would have made it more difficult for investigators to identify Manning as the source of disclosures of classified information. Prior to the formation of the password cracking agreement, now the reason why those words are in there is because it's a conspiracy. Manning had already provided WikiLeaks with hundreds of thousands of classified records that she downloaded from departments and agencies of the United States, including the Afghan war-related significant activity reports and Iraq war-related significant activity reports. This is not that either. At the time he entered into this agreement, Assange knew that Manning was providing WikiLeaks with classified records containing national defense information of the United States. Assange was knowingly receiving such classified records from Manning for the purposes of publicly disclosing them on the WikiLeaks website. This is not charging him with publishing those documents on the WikiLeaks website. This is not about publishing. This is about hacking and a conspiracy that Assange entered into with Chelsea Manning to crack a password-protected site that was protected by administrative level only privileges. That's what this is.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, The Randi Rhodes Show.
They have unsealed the charges. I just got it over my phone.
Okay.
So
tell us what they say.
It's a single count indictment from the Eastern District of Virginia, Alexandria, just across the Potomac River. A one count indictment charging Julian Assange with hacking. With participating in the hacking that led to the distribution of the Chelsea Manning documents in 2010. It's, considering the complexity of the case, it's a very straightforward, short indictment. It's only 8 pages long, and it's only one count. Now, the government could add to it. I note that it was filed in March of 2018, so it's been under seal for a year. But this is the case that is now pending against Julian Assange.
To my question, would they be likely to also ask him about his role in interference in the 2016 election, or is that off the table?
Can ask him anything.
Well, they can ask him anything they want. Most defendants choose to take the fifth and not answer questions of law enforcement, especially if they are under indictment, as Julian Assange is. And, just because there is a single indictment now doesn't mean the government won't supersede and add charges. They could certainly add charges related to the 2016 hacking in our presidential election. But at the moment, the only charge pending against Julian Assange, which was just unsealed as you were talking to Evan moments ago, relates to the hacking that Chelsea Manning did of State Department documents, and the charge, and this is very important, is that Julian Assange collaborated with Chelsea Manning, and this is an attempt by the Justice Department to get around the very difficult constitutional issues raised by this case, because traditionally the government has never charged journalists when they receive classified information and then publish it. The charge here is that Assange was not a passive recipient of classified information, but he was a participant in the hacking itself.
That's the charge, that Julian Assange participated in the hacking itself. Not that he received classified, secret, top secret, and published it, as a journalist would, should, and does. This is not about encouraging Chelsea Manning to continue to hack because he believed in transparency and the U.S. government was committing, heinous war crimes, or that they were doing a warrantless wiretap, or that No, this is something different. This is not what a journalist does. I know of no journalist who has ever participated in the actual hacking of classified, sensitive, secret, whatever information in order to get it and publish it. This is something else. And this is exactly what the indictment says. It's one count, and here it is. Beginning on or about March 2nd, 2010. And 2010 is a very important date. And the fact that this was filed a year ago in 2018, 8 years after this happened, is probably got something to do with a statute of limitations on the crime that was running. I promise you this date's going to be very, very important. And the idea that this indictment was filed a year ago, meeting an 8-year statute of limitations, is going to be in play. You'll see. All right. But here is what it says. Beginning on or about March 2nd, 2010, and continuing thereafter until on or about March 10th, 2010, the exact date being unknown to the grand jury, both dates being approximate and inclusive, in an offense begun and committed outside of the jurisdiction of any particular state or district of the United States, the defendant, Julian Paul Assange, who will be first brought to the Eastern District of Virginia, did knowingly and intentionally combine, conspire, confederate, and agree with other co-conspirators, known and unknown to the grand jury, to commit an offense against the United States, to wit. Now, why is this important? Because they're saying that this is an outside, a person that is not a U.S. citizen, who doesn't reside in the U.S., who is overseas, who is of a different, holds a different passport than a U.S. passport, and that they are breaking into classified U.S. computers that are maintained for various levels of secret, top secret, classified, eyes only, no foreign eyes information. That's going to be important as to the section of the code, the criminal code that is applied to him. Okay, all these words have meaning. A, he committed an offense against the United States, to wit, to knowingly access a computer without authorization and exceeding authorized access, to obtain information that has been determined by the United States government pursuant to an executive order and statute, to require protection against unauthorized disclosure for reasons of national defense and foreign relations, namely documents relating to the national defense classified up to the secret level, with reason to believe that such information so obtained could be used to the injury of the United States and the advantage of any foreign nation, and to willfully communicate, deliver, transmit, and cause to be communicated, delivered, or transmitted the same to any person not entitled to receive it, and willfully retain the same and fail to deliver it to the officer or employee entitled to receive it, and here's the hacking part, to intentionally access a computer without authorization and exceeding authorized access, to obtain information from a department and agency of the United States in furtherance of a criminal act in violation of the laws of the United States, that is, a violation of Title 18 U.S. Code, Sections 641, 793 C and 793E, and then in parenthesis, there's another code cited, Title 18 U.S. Code, Section 371, 1030A1, and 1030A2, and 1030C2, B, and B paragraph double I, the second paragraph. That, I believe, is going to be a statute on terrorism. That statute runs for 8 years. The other statutes, 18 U.S. Code 641, 793, that one, the two sections that they cite there, I believe that has a 5-year statute of limitations. So in parentheses, they charged him with a crime that's got an 8-year statute of limitations. And because this was committed in 2010, this hacking that Julian Assange participated in, which thereby makes him not a journalist, but makes him a hacker, a foreign hacker, they've decided to include part of a statute that was taken from the Patriot Act, believe it or not, with regard to terrorism. That has an 8-year statute.
Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
This just came out. WikiLeaks. I love WikiLeaks. This WikiLeaks stuff is unbelievable. Another one came in today. This WikiLeaks is like a treasure trove. Getting off the plane, they were just announcing new WikiLeaks, and I wanted to stay there, but I didn't want to keep you waiting. Boy, I love reading those WikiLeaks.
That was then, and this is now.
Mr. President, do you still love WikiLeaks?
I know nothing about WikiLeaks. It's not my thing. And I know there is something having to do with Julian Assange. I've been seeing what's happened with Assange, and that will be a determination, I would imagine, mostly by the Attorney General, who's doing an excellent job. So he'll be making a determination. I know nothing really about him. It's not my deal in life.
It's not his deal in life. It was his whole deal in life. He loved WikiLeaks. Loved it. I love it. Oh, it's a treasure trove. Oh, WikiLeaks. I didn't even want to get off the plane. I was reading the WikiLeaks. I was reading. Oh, I love WikiLeaks. I don't know anything about WikiLeaks. It's not my thing. WikiLeaks is not my thing. It's fascinating. This whole thing is fascinating. The timing of it is fascinating. That had happened last year during the Mueller investigation. You know, when Mueller charged 12 Russian intelligence officers in that indictment, that was the best indictment. That was the most informative indictment in the Mueller investigation. Why? Because it laid out the entire flow, the entire workflow of the Russian intelligence officers and where they went to get the materials and how they got the materials and how. And then in that indictment, they actually in 2016, you had the 12 Russians indicted, right, with carrying out the hack and leak operation, and there was a reference in that indictment to Organization 1. And back then, we all thought correctly, because we're in this business of thinking, that Organization 1 was WikiLeaks, and Organization 1 is WikiLeaks. However, they were never charged, and Assange has still not been charged with anything to do with 2016. This is not that. This is a conspiracy to commit computer intrusions, specifically that Julian Assange agreed to assist Chelsea Manning in cracking a password that was stored on a Department of Defense computer that did not belong to her, and actually used that Department of Defense computer to hack into the State Department. Now, what's so interesting about the State Department is that in 2010, Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State. You see what I mean? Now, where was Julian Assange supposed to be going? Okay, he was in the Ecuadorian embassy, and of course, Ecuador changed presidents. They changed presidents because their former president, I believe, is now in hiding in Belgium, awaiting charges of corruption, okay? So they got this new president, Moreno, and when Moreno made his announcement this morning, he did it in Spanish, so I won't play it for you, but he did it in Spanish, and he was citing for the Ecuadorian people the reason why he decided to revoke the asylum for Julian Assange as being that Julian Assange had hacked into the Vatican's computers, and you know, Ecuador is a very Catholic country, and this would outrage Ecuadorians, and so he was still messing with the politics of states. And he just couldn't have it anymore. He just couldn't have it. Now, what I understand was going to happen with Julian Assange, though, is that Julian Assange was going to be given diplomatic immunity by Ecuador. They were going to release him from the Ecuadorian embassy all along because this new president had always considered Julian Assange a stone in his shoe, a pain in the ass, and that Julian Assange had to have his internet, cut off because he was still messing around in other states' business, which was in violation of his asylum agreement with Ecuador. He had said that he would not mess around in other states' businesses. And he was doing it still. And he was a slob, apparently, and they made him clean up after his cat. And Julian Assange was mean to the people at the embassy. He was insulting to them. He was yelling at them. He was just a stone in the shoe of the new Ecuadorian president, Moreno. And so Moreno was trying to figure out, what do I do with this guy? Well, before Mike Pence went over there to Quito, the capital of Ecuador, and talked Moreno into revoking his asylum without giving him diplomatic immunity, Moreno was inclined to give Julian Assange diplomatic immunity so that he could travel to Russia and be a Russian diplomat. And that's where Julian Assange was supposed to be going. Now, if you were Donald Trump, would you want a guy like Julian Assange teaming up with another ward of the state of Russia, Edward Snowden, to monitor, the Trump presidency, and if Trump has any illegal activities that he's got in mind, would you want them out there? So it's a very complex case. It's a very interesting story. It's a very bizarre charge, not the charge of hacking. That's very pedestrian. And apparently, they go through the how he was hacking, and they have the actual conversations between Chelsea Manning and Julian Assange under the section of this indictment called Manners and Means of the Conspiracy. It actually lays out the conversations that they have, or at least some of them, not all of them. They wouldn't put their whole prosecutorial, intentions in an indictment. They would just put enough in an indictment for an indictment, right? And so under Manners and Means, it says Assange and his co-conspirators, and that's plural, used the following ways, manners, and means, among others, to carry out this purpose. Now, they only give you a couple. Actually, they give you two. It was part of the conspiracy that Assange and Manning used the Jabber online chat service. So for those of you, it's like AOL Instant Messenger, which I barely remember. But I do remember my handle. I think it was Randi Radio 2004. I don't know what the password was anymore, or else I would log on and see if anybody has instant messaged me in, what would this be, 15 years? That'd be interesting. But anyway, it's that kind of a chat service, right? So it was part of the conspiracy that Assange and Manning used the Jabber online chat service to collaborate on the acquisition and dissemination of the classified records and to enter into the agreement to crack the password stored on the United States Department of Defense computers connected to the secret Internet Protocol network. It was part of the conspiracy that Assange and Manning took measures to conceal Manning as the source of the disclosure of classified records to WikiLeaks, including by removing usernames from the disclosed information and deleting chat logs between Assange and Manning. It was part of the conspiracy that Assange encouraged Manning to provide information and records from departments and agencies of the United States. It was part of the conspiracy that Assange and Manning used a special folder on a cloud Dropbox of WikiLeaks to transmit classified records containing information related to the national defense of the United States. So they lay out some of what they intend to produce that they have. And it's a chat. It's more than one.
The Randi Rhodes Show is live on RandiRhodes.com and the free Progressive Voices app for Android and iOS. Visit the App Store or ProgressiveVoices.com now.
That's why it's so complicated. I think that's candidate Trump, obviously, who has talked about WikiLeaks and obviously very giddy about the help that he was getting from those documents that were stolen from the DNC and the Clinton campaign. But as Jeffrey pointed out, this is a complicated case. Under the Obama administration, under Eric Holder, they looked at charging Julian Assange, and that's where this investigation began. And they arrived at exactly what Jeffrey said, that essentially WikiLeaks is no different from the New York Times, receiving classified information and publishing them. They were a publisher, right? That changed after Jeff Sessions became Attorney General. We reported previously that they were looking to file charges in early 2017, and partly what happened was this 2017 publishing of these CIA hacking tools, and that's one of the things that happened in the intervening years, that prosecutors at the Justice Department decided, and the lawyers there decided, that WikiLeaks had transformed, in their view, from being just a publisher to being an active participant in trying to encourage people to steal stuff. That's where they believe the line lies. Now, Jeffrey pointed out, this is a theory that's going to be tested probably by the British courts first, and then here. I don't think it's a very clear shot here at bringing these charges, or rather succeeding in these charges, but I think it's what makes it so fascinating.
Well, this was early this morning. This was before the indictment was unsealed, and everybody was left to wonder, is this a freedom of speech thing? Because the Obama administration had chosen not to prosecute Julian Assange because he was just a publisher. Well, apparently, during the Mueller investigation, when those 12 Russian intelligence officers were indicted, something changed. Some information bubbled to the top. Some information was presented to a grand jury sitting in Alexandria, Virginia, that caused them last year to go ahead and indict Julian Assange on a single count, and the count had nothing to do with publishing. The count had to do with Julian Assange himself participating in hacking. That's what changed, okay? This is not simply, publishing powerful people's communications. This wasn't just, obviously Julian Assange hates Hillary Clinton. I don't know if you understand that, but Julian Assange is the person who obviously helped Chelsea Manning. Now we know. Crack a code that was partially available in a Defense Department computer that Chelsea Manning was not supposed to be inside. But Chelsea Manning had gotten somewhat inside this computer and got a partial password that would have allowed her to hack into the State Department's computers. And that's what they were working on together, cracking a code that would allow Chelsea Manning to use a Department of Defense computer to hack into the State Department's computer. And that is what happened. WikiLeaks published 250,000 diplomatic cables and hundreds of thousands of military documents from the Iraq War. And Secretary of State Hillary Clinton was livid because she was the Secretary of State, and they had broken into the state secretary. They've broken into the State Department's computers. Now, that said, it didn't seem like, Julian Assange was doing anything except publishing. But now we know that as of last year, a grand jury found evidence that Julian Assange was conspiring with Chelsea Manning to do the actual hacking. Journalists do not hack. They don't. And then in 2017, once Donald Trump was president, WikiLeaks went ahead and posted a new set of material. And I don't know how many people are aware of what this was, but this is what they were talking about in that clip. Julian Assange went ahead and published something called Vault 7. Vault 7 is a toolbox for hacking. The CIA's hacking tools. And Julian Assange was able to get his hands on Vault 7's material, and he published it. The New York Times documented it, and they wrote, this appeared to be the largest leak of CIA documents in history. Now, that happened in 2017, and a CIA software engineer named Joshua Schulte has been charged in connection with it. Now, we don't know if this grew out of that case. We don't know if this grew out of the Russian intelligence officers case where Mueller indicted 12 Russian intelligence officers. We don't know if that grew out of going through Roger Stone's material. We don't know if that grew out of, Jerome Corsi's material about their interactions with WikiLeaks. We don't know if that grew out of something Guccifer 2.0, who was one of the Russian intelligence officers who was communicating with Roger Stone. We don't know where this case grew out of. But we do know that in 2017, an additional hack that actually exposed the CIA's hacking toolbox was gotten by Julian Assange and published by Julian Assange, and that a CIA software engineer is facing charges for that, and maybe he's cooperating. So before everybody loses their mind about freedom of the press is going out the window and da-da-da, even Tulsi Gabbard, I saw her on CNN. And of course, if you want a defense of Russian hacking, or if you want a defense of hacking, and if you want a defense of anything, go to her. But even she had to admit that the hacking charge has got to be explored in a court of law. And it does. And if Julian Assange somehow escapes the statute of limitations, well, then that's one thing. If Julian Assange somehow has a defense that can clearly show that he wasn't conspiring with Chelsea Manning to hack materials that he would then publish, then that's another thing. But if he's charged with hacking and he's not guilty of it, then he will not go to prison. But if he is charged with hacking and the evidence clearly shows that he was conspiring to hack with Chelsea Manning. Now, the reason why, Chelsea Manning got 35 years for what she did. But Chelsea Manning did 7 years in a federal prison. Barack Obama commuted Chelsea Manning's sentence after 7 years. But Chelsea Manning went back to jail because Chelsea Manning refused to testify in front of the grand jury on this issue. And that's why Chelsea Manning was remanded back to prison. So this story is complex. It is not as easy as going on the outrage machine called Twitter and yelling at me because I posted the indictment and said that this has nothing to do with publishing. Because I have never known or seen or spoken to any journalist or any publisher of any material ever who participated in hacking to get that material. That is a different animal. That is not journalism. That is something else. And when I look at the statutes that they invoked here in this year-old sealed indictment, I see that they invoked a terrorism statute. Because Assange is not an American, and he's inside American defense systems where he's not allowed to be in a conspiracy with an intelligence analyst who was adjudicated guilty and given 35 years in prison, but had their sentence commuted by Barack Obama. So it's not simple. And it has, as far as I can tell, it has nothing to do with freedom of the press. And people are going to harp on that and harp on, we're all in danger. We're going to lose our freedom of speech. If we do, it isn't going to be because of Julian Assange. It'll be because Donald Trump changes the libel laws. It'll be because Donald Trump, has this hit piece out today asking people to name the 4 fakest news outlets. Because he wants to retaliate against the 4 fakest news outlets, right? He sent an email out, a fundraising email out. All right, Linwood in Virginia.
Hi, Rand. It's been a long time we've had a conversation. But I was asking a question because it's since I've been hearing, I heard about this through RT, and yes, like you, I saw people say, Chelsea Manning, Julian Assange, this is going to be the darkest day in journalism. But this man committed crimes while on bail.
And just so you know,
no one prosecuted him.
And just so you know, when you're watching RT has actively collaborated with WikiLeaks. So just know your source.
Well, thank you for letting me know that.
Yes.
But my question is, how come they didn't prosecute him when he was still committing crimes while under bail in their jurisdiction? Why is this coming out now?
Because he applied for and received asylum.
And his boys ain't helping him. Donald Trump ain't helping him. Sean Hannity ain't helping him. And these people are on record saying, hey, Julian Assange, got us the dirt. So should they be also investigated for also?
No.
Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon.
I have a dream today.
Change has come to America.
Believe it.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
No, there is no law.
There's no law.
As you know, I got elected last time with the same issue. And while I'm under audit, I won't do it. If I'm not under audit, I would do it. I had no problem with it. But while I'm under audit, I would not give my taxes. There's no law whatsoever. Now, I will say this. I would love to give them, but I'm not going to do it while I'm under audit. It's very simple. Remember, I got elected last time, the same exact issue, with the same intensity, which wasn't very much, because frankly, the people don't care. What I have done is approximately a 104-page summary, and really in great detail, of assets and values, and nobody wants to go over that because it's so good. I built a great company, one of the best companies. I have some of the greatest assets in the world. I did a good job, and now, frankly, I don't care about them. I only care about the United States, but I have no obligation to do that while I'm under audit.
Okay, so that's not true. I think we all know that's not true. And the president is a lawless man, and he doesn't feel bound by any law. Now, Preet Bharara, who is obviously a prosecutor, is from the Southern District of New York. He was the person who actually was prosecuting the Prevezon case. The Prevezon case, the case that Bill Browder actually brought to the attention of America when Vladimir Putin stole $230 million of Russian taxpayer money that Bill Browder had paid to the Russian government because he was leaving Russia and sold all his assets in Russia and made $1 billion doing it, and then owed $230 million in taxes to the Russian Federation, and he paid it. Well, Vladimir Putin stole that money and laundered it through a company called Prevezon. Preet Bharara was on that case, and then when Donald Trump became president, he fired Preet. And suddenly that case was settled. Isn't that something? And the day that the Trump Tower meeting occurred, Natalia Veselnitskaya, who was the lawyer for Prevezon, happened to be there going over the settlement. And then she toddled over to the Trump Tower meeting. That's what happened there. So Donald Trump is a lawless man. And we all know Donald Trump is a lawless man. And Preet was on Bloomberg. And they asked Preet, is there a law that applies to the president that would require him to show his taxes?
Yeah, so I read the statute, 6103, I think it's F, subsection F.
Yes.
Yeah, very impressive that I knew the statutory site.
Yes,
and that seems very clear. You know, it doesn't admit of exceptions. It says, you know, shall furnish to the committee, tax return of any person. And it doesn't say there's an exception for the president. But I think you're correct that you have this other, political dimension to all of this, both on the part of the requesting committee and on the part of the IRS and the president saying you shouldn't have it. And my worry in all of this is that there are good faith bases for saying we're going to redact this, or there are good faith bases for saying we're going to request this, or there are good faith bases for saying the IRS should not produce something. And I worry that those are pretexts sometimes, and it's hard to judge how good faith the people's views are separate and apart from the law. I mean,
okay, so he is a very even-handed guy, right? He's saying, look, there is a political dimension, and you never really want to put, anybody in the middle of politics when it comes to the law. The law is the law. But I've read the statute, 1603, subparagraph F, and there's no carve out for the president. The president, it says shall furnish. The secretary, it says the IRS commissioner, who's a guy named Charles Rettig, not Steve Mnuchin, shall furnish upon request of the Ways and Means Committee chair, who made the request, Richard Neal, or the Senate Finance Committee. And there's also this other little detail that I want you to always remember now as we go through this whole conversation, that Donald Trump will not release his tax returns, even though the law requires it. And that is that all presidents and vice presidents are automatically audited when they become president and when they become vice president, to make sure they're not on the take, to make sure that they can't be bribed, to make sure that they aren't laundering foreign money in exchange for policy that benefits that foreign country. Just saying. I heard Preet say that, listen, I read the statute and it says shall furnish. So that's that, right? That's that. Then yesterday, Bill Barr went to testify. And, he testified to the House, on Tuesday? Today's Thursday, right? He testified on the House, in front of the House, and it was a subcommittee, okay? And that's why, you didn't see, the most incredible, question. It was a mishmash. And then the Senate. He went to the Senate to testify, too. And there were some sharper minds there. And he was asked a couple of things in the Senate that stood out. And one of the things that he was asked, I believe it was Carolyn Maloney who asked him, about why don't you, the Inspector General at the Department of Justice is a guy named Michael Horowitz, and we all know Michael Horowitz's name because Michael Horowitz was put in charge of investigating Andy McCabe, who was the deputy to James Comey, deputy FBI director. And so McCabe was found to have legally, he didn't break any laws. McCabe didn't break any laws. Leak to the Wall Street Journal information regarding the Hillary Clinton email investigation after it was over. And Horowitz was put in charge of finding out if Andy McCabe was a bad guy and if he was this and that. Andy McCabe literally lost his pension 5 minutes before it was about to kick in. He was retiring. And the Trump administration and Jeff Sessions just totally ripped him off and took away his pension that he had earned after 20 years. I mean, that was just a disgusting, disgusting episode. And of course, he had done nothing illegal. James Comey also, said that the deputy was authorized to authorize any leaks to the press. And it's just so interesting that all these people today that care about press freedom, that care about, leakers and anonymous sources being protected in the name of great journalism. And poor Julian Assange. They will be the first people to tell you that McCabe got what was coming to him, because even though he was authorized to allow an agent to speak to the Wall Street Journal, which was his big crime, and Michael Horowitz found that he was authorized and that was, not a crime, but he was less than forthcoming about it, lost his entire pension. Now, because we know that Michael Horowitz, the Inspector General of the Department of Justice, has been conducting an internal investigation into how the Justice Department handled the Hillary Clinton email investigation and how the Department of Justice handled the counterintelligence investigation into Russian meddling, which we know occurred because 12 Russian intelligence officers were indicted by Bob Mueller, and Organization 1 in that indictment was WikiLeaks, okay? And now we understand that the Inspector General has been looking at the origins of the counterintelligence investigation for a very long time. Bill Barr decides he's going to go and testify and tell Congress, tell the Senate, he's going to appoint a new team to look into the origins of the Russian meddling counterintelligence investigation, because he thinks Donald Trump, like Devin Nunes, was spied on. Well, looking at all the WikiLeaks leaks and looking at all the stuff that was stolen, seems to me that WikiLeaks was routinely and regularly on my command, and my being the Trump campaign's command, releasing all kinds of internal documents of Hillary Clinton's. It seems to me that WikiLeaks, was out to get Hillary Clinton, and so were the Russians out to get Hillary Clinton. Now Bill Barr says, I'm going to set up a whole team to look into the spying, and uses that word like he was a pundit on Fox News, like he is Sean Hannity, like he is Laura Ingraham, like he is Jeanine Pirro, in front of the Senate as the Attorney General of the United States of America. That's criminal.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
As I said in my confirmation hearing, I am going to be reviewing both the genesis and the conduct of intelligence activities directed at the Trump campaign during 2016. A lot has already been a lot of this has already been investigated, and a substantial portion of it has been investigated and is being investigated by the Office of Inspector General at the department.
Right. So why don't you talk to him?
But one of the things I want to do is pull together all the information from the various investigations that have gone on, including on the Hill and in the department, and see if there are any remaining questions to be addressed.
And can you share with us why you feel a need to do that?
Yeah, really.
Well, for the same reason we're worried about foreign influence in elections. We want to make sure that during an election, I think spying on a political campaign is a big deal. It's a big deal. Generation I grew up in, which was the Vietnam War period, people were all concerned about spying on anti-war people and so forth by the government. And there were a lot of rules put in place to make sure that there's an adequate basis before our law enforcement agencies get involved in political surveillance. I'm not suggesting that those rules were violated, but I think it's important to look at that. And I'm not talking about the FBI necessarily, but intelligence agencies more broadly.
So you're not suggesting though that spying occurred.
I don't. I guess you could. I think spying did occur.
What?
Yes, I think spying did occur.
What?
Well, let me.
But the question is whether it was adequately predicated, and I'm not suggesting it wasn't adequately predicated, but I need to explore that.
What?
I think it's my obligation. Congress is usually very concerned about intelligence agencies and law enforcement agencies staying in their proper lane, and I want to make sure that happened. We have a lot of rules about that, and I want to say that I've said I'm reviewing this. I haven't set up a team yet, but I have in mind having some colleagues help me pull all this information together and let me know whether there's some areas that should be looked at.
What?
And I also want to make clear this is not launching an investigation of the FBI. Frankly, to the extent there were any issues at the FBI, I do not view it as a problem that's endemic to the FBI. I think there was probably a failure among a group of leaders there.
Wow. Now, that shook the world yesterday. It really did. And it should. That the Attorney General of the United States, our attorney, see, the Attorney General of the United States is your attorney, my attorney. He represents, in all cases where you see the people versus, he's the people. He's the people. Except not anymore. We have an Attorney General who is the lawyer for the president. If the president wants a lawyer, the president should go get a lawyer and not use the people's lawyer as his personal attorney. I think we all know that the president's previous attorney is going to federal prison next month. But now the people's attorney, the Attorney General of the United States of America, is talking like he's a pundit on Fox News and putting into crazy people's heads that even though through the 2016 election, all the damaging information that we saw, all of the screwed up, horrible email dumps that had Podesta's risotto recipe that said, showed us Debbie Wasserman Schultz was questioning Bernie Sanders' Judaism, that was anti-Hillary Clinton, that was, Donald Trump standing on a stage asking the Russians to please find her 33,000 emails because the press will reward you mightily. That all of this that happened during the 2016 election, all of the spying, even by the transparency people at WikiLeaks, right? The transparency people like Glenn Greenwald and like, Julian Assange, was all spying on Hillary Clinton. They hacked, they spied, they released, they published. Now all of a sudden, Bill Barr, I have to figure out if Donald Trump was spied on. I think spying happened. I think he was spied on. I got to say, I think he was spied. This is stunning and frightening You want something to be stunned about? You want something to be frightened about today? It ain't Julian Assange. It's not free speech. It's this attorney general and this administration that is a lawless administration. That's why we started showing you Donald Trump doesn't think there is any law that applies to him. Donald Trump doesn't think that the IRS commissioner shall furnish his tax returns. Donald Trump thinks that if he's under audit, that is somehow a pass. None of that is true. And it's frightening.
You heard what the Attorney General said today, that spying did occur in the president's campaign. I'm wondering what your reaction was.
Well, I thought it was both stunning and scary.
Mm-hmm.
I was amazed at that and rather disappointed that the Attorney General would say such a thing. That, you know, the term spying has all kinds of negative connotations, and I have to believe he chose that term deliberately. And I think it's incredible that if he has concerns, he could easily have, on his first day on the job after his confirmation, asked his own IG, the Inspector General of the Department of Justice, for a briefing on his preliminary findings, who, in the course of his investigation, that is the IG's investigation, into whether there was any wrongdoing by the FBI. And I think it would have been far more appropriate for him to just defer to that investigation.
Yes.
Rather than postulating with apparently no evidence. He just has a feeling.
A feeling.
That there was spying against the campaign. One other big point here I would want to make to you, Anderson, is we're losing sight here of what started all this, and that was the Russian meddling, the Russian interference in our election process. And the Russians pose a profound threat to this country. And based on the success that they enjoyed as a result of their meddling in the 2016 election, they're going to continue that. And we're not focusing on that. And we're focusing on this circus about
spying.
You know, whether or not somebody was spying on the campaign, which is, I think, a gross misstatement.
It's bizarre. It's, you know, Trump loves to play the victim. Trump creates chaos, points at the chaos, and then tells you he's the victim. All of this is happening to him, even though he creates these messes. He actually does this. Now, Bill Barr was also asked yesterday, how did you come to exonerate Trump?
Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
Are you pleased that your Attorney General yesterday said that there was spying into your campaign in 2016?
Yes, I am. I think what he said was absolutely true. There was absolutely spying into my campaign. I'll go a step further. In my opinion, it was illegal spying, unprecedented spying.
Oh, my God.
And something that should never be allowed to happen in our country again. And I think his answer was actually a very accurate one, and a lot of people saw that. And a lot of people understand, many people understand the situation and want to be open to that situation. Hard to believe it could have happened, but it did. There was spying in my campaign, and his answer was a very accurate one. There was no collusion and there was no obstruction. And we never did anything wrong. The people that did something wrong were the other side, the dirty cops and a lot of the problems that were caused. It's a disgrace what happened. And again, it should never happen to a president again. You're just lucky I happen to be the president, because a lot of other presidents would have reacted much differently than I reacted. You're very lucky I was the president during the scam.
What?
During the Russian hoax, as I call it.
Oh, my God.
So, no, I'm not concerned at all. The bottom line, the result is no collusion, no obstruction, and that's the way it is. And I know a lot of people were very disappointed, but they knew the real answer. You know, when the Democrats go behind the scenes and they go into a room backstage and they sit and they talk, they laugh, because they know it's all a big scam, a big hoax. And it's called politics, but this is dirty politics, and this is actually treason. It's a very bad thing that people have done. And I just hope that law enforcement takes it up, because if they don't take it up, they're doing a great disservice to our country.
He's a very sick man. He has, in the last 2 days, invoked a coup and treason. Treason. Betraying your country in a time of war. Treason. I don't even let people that call this show say the word treason about any president ever. I don't even let people get away with that. But the president sits there and throws out these words. And he's got an attorney general that throws out these words like Fox News pundits throw out these words. Now, the obstruction question that Bill Barr was asked, he could not answer. Okay? Bill Barr was asked, why did you make the choice to exonerate Donald Trump in the obstruction case when Mueller couldn't come to a conclusion about whether or not the president obstructed justice? And Bill Barr could not answer that question.
On the question of obstruction of justice, you stated in your March 24th letter that the Mueller report does not exonerate the president.
Right.
Can you elaborate on what is meant by does not exonerate the president?
I think that's the language from the report.
Right, I understand that.
Elaborate.
That's a statement made by the special counsel.
Right.
I reported as one of his bottom line conclusions. So I'm not in a position to discuss that further until the report is all out. And then what is meant by exonerate is really a question that I can't answer. What he meant by that.
But as you sit here today, you can't opine, after having read the report yourself, why it reaches that conclusion that it does not exonerate the president.
That's right.
That's right. I can't.
I am going to explain my decision, and to the extent that requires any assessment of the Mueller report, I'm going to do that when the Mueller report is out.
Did your decision require you to look into the intent of the President of the United States with respect to obstruction of justice?
I'm not going to discuss my decision. I will lay it out after the report is out.
Mr. Attorney General, the thing is, you put this out there. I mean, the president went out and tweeted the next day that he was exonerated. That wasn't based on anything in the Mueller report with respect to obstruction of justice. That was based on your assessment. That was on March 24th. And now you won't elaborate at all as to how you reached that conclusion.
I will discuss that decision after the report is out.
Did Bob Mueller support your conclusion?
I don't know whether Bob Mueller supported my conclusion.
I don't know whether Bob Mueller supported my conclusion is another way of saying he didn't.
Exactly. And you know why? Because Bob Mueller was operating under the Office of Legal Counsel's instructions that a sitting president can't be indicted, and so he left it to Congress, who has under their Article 1 duties impeachment of a president for high crimes and misdemeanors, and obstruction of justice would qualify. So Bob Mueller left it to Congress. Again, let's go to Preet Bharara. Why did Bill Barr make the obstruction go away?
Based on the report, on the summary that Bill Barr himself put forward, I think there are a lot of questions to ask. In particular, the reasoning behind his decision. In the absence of Bob Mueller deciding the question of obstruction and whether or not it was criminal, the decision-making by Bill Barr as to make a pronouncement and essentially exonerate the president when it doesn't look like that question was intended for Bill Barr. It looks like Bob Mueller intended for that question to be answered by Congress. So, I would ask that question in 100 different ways. Why did you do that? Do you have an understanding of what Bob Mueller's intention was? Was there anything in the report that suggested in its language that Bob Mueller wanted Congress to ultimately answer the question, because that's how our system of government is set up, where you have co-equal branches of government, and you have a mechanism for holding a president accountable in the Constitution itself. What was your thinking about that? The timing as to why you put out that summary so quickly, but then the delay in the timing of releasing the full report.
Hello.
What are the reasons for that? What are the bases on which you plan to redact things? I think there are a million questions to ask. I agree with your premise that those questions would probably be more probing and thoughtful and result in more light once they understand what happened with the Mueller report. But I don't think it'll be, without illumination.
So basically, here we are in a situation where Bill Barr, in a weekend, decided to exonerate the president when Mueller, after 22 months, could not. Okay. But Bill Barr hasn't yet released the Mueller report. Now, Congress gave him a deadline of April 2nd to release the Mueller report. And Bill Barr says that he will release the Mueller report sometime, we think, next week. I'm thinking of Friday night, tomorrow night news dump, or what would be more considerate would be a Monday morning, so that everybody would be in a position to read it, to research it, to ask their questions all throughout the week, right? But once that report comes out, the very first thing that has to happen, the very, very first thing that has to happen is Bob Mueller has got to testify in front of Congress. The only reason why Bob Mueller hasn't been subpoenaed or asked to testify in front of Congress yet is because we don't have the Mueller report, and you can't ask somebody questions about a report you haven't read. And so there's an order of things. The report has to come, and yes, it will be completely redacted, and I'll bet you it starts like on, April 1st, 2016, and then all kinds of red and blah, 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 and 15 pages later, you'll get the next sentence. And Bob Mueller can come in and be asked about those redactions. That's what has to happen next.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
This. Do you believe that the investigation that Director Mueller undertook was a witch hunt or illegal, as been asserted by the president?
As I said during my confirmation, it really depends on where you're sitting. If you are somebody who is being falsely accused of something, you would tend to view the investigation as...
Well, you're sitting as the Attorney General of the United States with the constitutional responsibility, so if you could answer in that regard.
Well, I'm not going to characterize it is what it is.
It is what it is.
Mueller and his team conducted an investigation and are issuing a report.
Jeffrey, what does any of that mean?
Really?
Well, it means that Fox News is in charge of the Justice Department. I mean, this really is an extraordinary adoption of the conspiratorial language that the president and his supporters in the news media use to describe the Mueller investigation, the Justice Department, and to hear the Attorney General talk this way. Bill Barr may have been Attorney General in the old days of the Republican Party under George Herbert Walker Bush, but he's obviously been watching a lot of Fox since he became a private citizen, and he's adopting their language and their characterization of the department he now heads.
That's so true. And it's a little, you want to be frightened. You want to be scared of something. You want to understand whether America is still a nation of laws or if America is a nation of men. Then all you need to do is listen to our lawyer, the Attorney General of the United States, the man who represents the people of the United States in every single case that's been, that is to be brought on behalf of the people of the United States, talk in such a way that he's going to now investigate whether or not Donald Trump was spied on during the campaign, and the only information that was released that was negative about Donald Trump during the campaign was Donald Trump's own words. The Access Hollywood stuff and the, comments about Carly Fiorina and how could you vote for that face, and the comments about Megyn Kelly and she was bleeding from her eyes and various other body parts. I mean, there was no deep information about Donald Trump. His tax returns were never leaked. His emails were never leaked. He doesn't use email. He says his phones were never, tapped. His son's phones were never tapped. The emails that we got as a result of the Trump Tower meeting were released by idiot boy Donald Jr. the quotes that we got from Eric Trump about we don't rely on American banks, most of our money comes from Russia now, came from Eric Trump in publications that were public. I mean, this is just a ridiculous rabbit hole that Bill Barr is, going down only because he is somehow compromised himself. And I don't know what his deal is. Is he in debt? Does he need money? Is he trying to become a Supreme Court justice? Does he think Ruth Bader Ginsburg is too old and that she won't make it another year or two? I don't know what his motivation is, but whatever it is, it's evil and untoward, and it has absolutely nothing to do with following the laws of the United States or representing the people or the interests of the people. This man is talking like a Fox News pundit. This man is talking like Jeanine Pirro. This man is saying spying and I mean, Jeanine Pirro sat on her show, said, we need a cleansing at the Justice Department, which I thought was just like real Nazi talk. I just thought that was off the freaking hook to hear somebody sitting on American television talking about a cleansing of a law enforcement agency that represents the people of the United States. I just thought that was so bizarre. It's not like she was talking about Black Lives Matter and saying, no one's ever prosecuted for shooting unarmed black men, and we need a cleansing of, local police. No, she was talking about the representation that the people of the United States receive from the attorney. It's such a sick thing. And everybody seems to agree that this man is not to be trusted, that Bob Barr has an ulterior motive, and we don't know exactly what it is yet, but whatever it is, it's not you. You are not in his mind when he's making these arguments about, I have to find out if Donald Trump was spied on. What information did we get about Donald Trump that was gotten through spying? What information did we get? Did we ever see any of the Celebrity Apprentice tapes about, the way he treated people on The Apprentice? Did we ever see? No, Mark Burnett never leaked a damn thing, and nobody ever spied, and nobody ever got hold of those tapes, right? I mean, we have a reality TV star as the President of the United States, and he's alleging that we spied on him, and we got no information. Worst spies ever.
What Barr is trying to do by selectively answering questions, he's creating this fog of exoneration where he's answering questions that seem to potentially be helpful to the president, declining to answer questions that may hurt the president, like, well, has anybody in the White House reviewed this report? And I tell you, I found really problematic that one clip that you played earlier where they're asking Barr, well, does Bob Mueller agree with you exonerating the president on obstruction of justice? And Barr says, I don't know. And then he follows up with, well, I didn't even bother to ask him. Ari, Bob Mueller was not only the director of the FBI, he was the acting U.S. attorney in Massachusetts and the U.S. attorney in San Francisco. He was the chief of the entire homicide practice at the D.C. U.S. attorney's office. The man knows how to make a prosecutorial decision, and left to his own devices, he always will. You have to wonder what kind of a shell game Barr is playing. And now we're going to get the color redactions, as you all were just referencing, and it's going to go from a fog of exoneration to what? A rainbow of obfuscation? The whole thing. And I think Jed put his finger. What you're gesturing towards is the type of colored smoke you see at some rock shows, sometimes punk shows. They have colored smoke machines. That seems to be where you're going if it's a fog of rainbow redactions. Yes, and designed to not have you pay attention to the fact that the Rock Act is really over the hill.
And then they go off on a tangent. But I mean, honestly, this is crazy. This is absolutely bizarro world. So we're going to get a rainbow of obstruction, okay, because he's going to take his Sharpies. He's going to use the red one for, 6E material, which, by the way, 6E material, grand jury material, all Barr has to do, and I think I told you this a million times, is go to the court and make an argument on behalf of the people of the United States. See if he was acting at our behest, for our benefit, so that we could know whether or not the president was so good at obstructing justice that it actually kept Mueller from being able to prove a case of coordination and collusion and conspiracy. See, that I think the obstruction was so intense and so coordinated that it worked. Obstruction and witness tampering and perjury and all that crap worked. But the 6E, the grand jury material, like what people said in secret about what was going on in the Trump campaign, if Bill Barr was our attorney, he would immediately go to the court and he would ask the court to make public the grand jury testimony as they did in the Clinton, and I mean Bill Clinton case. And in Watergate also, because one of the reasons why you would declassify, or it's not classified, but why you would take the grand jury material and make it public is if you can show the court that there is a national interest in knowing. And my God, this investigation has sparked more national interest on all sides of the question than any other case since probably the Bill Clinton impeachment of 1998. And we saw Bill Clinton's grand jury testimony. We saw all the grand jury testimony. In the Hillary Clinton case, we saw 880,000 pages of information. But Bill Barr is not acting as our attorney. He's acting as Donald Trump's attorney. And that's why he won't go to court to make public the grand jury 6E material. And I kept telling you, 6E, that's gonna be like a big thing in your head. Okay, that's all you're gonna hear once the Mueller report drops is 6E material. It's 6E material. That just means the grand jury material, things that people testify to in a secret grand jury proceeding to guarantee them a sense of being able to be honest. Well, I think if you're under oath, you should be able to be honest. But we have this secrecy rule. But if you can show a court that there's a national interest in knowing, then the court will release the grand jury material. But Bill Barr won't do that. He will redact. And that's why people are saying that Bill Barr is off the rails.
How very, very dismaying and disappointing that the chief law enforcement officer of our country is going off the rails yesterday and today.
And Mazie Hirono also.
What I thought about that is when Barr opens his mouth, Trump's words come popping out.
Yes.
So I'm sure that made Trump very happy because it totally played into the Trump narrative that this is all some kind of a plot to get him. And I also think it's just so odd that Trump uses words that would be used in a dictatorship, a coup. This is a coup attempt. No, we don't have coups in our country. We have things called elections. We have things called rule of law. I found it astounding that the Attorney General would use a highly charged word like spying. Astounding, but he sounded like the president to me.
He doesn't sound like an American president. He has been out there saying that this was a coup and we won, we beat it back, and I've been exonerated and no obstruction. No. His hand-picked attorney general who auditioned for the job it took him longer to write a 19-page memo about why the president is immune from being prosecuted than it did for him to exonerate Donald Trump of obstruction of justice, something Mueller left for Congress to do, believing that only Congress has the power to hold a president accountable. You remember that.